A new rumor claims that Marvel Studios has cleaned house and fired all of its activist producers and said no to the woke. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com. This new rumor comes from Film Threat founder Chris Gore. He did an appearance on the Critical Drinkers YouTube channel. If you want to watch the whole video here, I will have the link in the description below. But this is what he said. I do know people who work at Marvel. They have cleaned house. They quietly, months ago, fired all the producers that could be labeled activist. He continued saying, unlike Lucasfilm, Lucasfilm is lost. They're lost. They are doubling down on all the nonsense. You will never get anything good out of Lucasfilm and Star Wars. That's it. He then said this. Kevin Feige recognizes, basically, he said that we tried it. It didn't work. He's talking about Phase 4. It didn't work. No Kang, none of these side characters that don't have the legacy of classic characters. And if Deadpool and Wolverine proves anything, you've heard that phrase, male and pale is stale. That was spoken aloud across studios. But if you look at box office this year, I would say male and pale is money. And that's the phrase that I think people should more adopt. He then noted this. Additionally, they fired people that don't know the comics. But it's going to be a sea change that will take years. Years. That's why they are announcing this now. We know we screwed up and failed, but look at what's coming. So we're going to get 2 bad movies, 2 bad TV shows, and maybe a good Fantastic Four film. So that is the rumor from Chris Gore. He says they fired activist producers. They got rid of the woke. They fired people that don't know the comics. And they are moving forward with Robert Downey Jr. and the Russo brothers with their Avengers movies. But there's going to be some bad movies coming out in the meantime. Looks like Captain America, Thunderbolts, I think is what he's referring to. Captain America movie without Captain America. Thunderbolts movie without the Thunderbolts. And then obviously, I think Agatha All Along on the TV side. And then I don't even know what else they've got on the TV side. I guess the Ironheart show is still there that I think they finished. But they've just been sitting on. And maybe Daredevil is where they might turn the tide there. Because we did have this report at the end of last year from the Hollywood Reporter's Boris Kitt that the company was indeed revamping its television side. So I think there is some truth to what Chris Gore is saying here, but I don't fully buy into everything. And so we'll get through this here. But this is where I think there is some validity to it, because we did have this report, like I said, from the Hollywood Reporter's Boris Kitt at the end of last year, where he reported that the company was, quote, revamping its development process, specifically on its television side, saying that showrunners will write pilots and show Bibles. The days of Marvel shooting an entire series from She-Hulk to Secret Vision, then looking at what's working and what's not, are done. Secret Invasion, infamously, the director for that infamously said that he was still putting together the editing of like the final episodes after the first episode had already aired. I mean, what are we thinking here? Just ridiculous. Marvel's head of streaming television and animation, Brad Winterbaum, also informed Kitt, we're trying to marry the Marvel culture with the traditional television culture. He said, we need executives that are dedicated to this medium, that are going to focus on streaming, focus on television, because they are 2 different forms. In April, we also had a report from Kitt and his colleague at the Hollywood Reporter, Aaron Couch, that Marvel Studios was hit with some layoffs. The duo reported that, quote, around 15 people, including junior-level employees in production and development, were laid off. So maybe those 15 people were some of the activists that Chris Gore is talking about. Obviously, that doesn't seem like a lot for a studio like Marvel Studios. Clearly, I would think that there's a lot more than just 15 people that are fully bought into the woke agenda. We know how infected the entire Walt Disney Company is with the woke agenda. So to kind of Gore's point about Feige's recent comments, he did say that Phase 4 characters that were introduced are unlikely to show up in the company's upcoming Avengers film. he told Gizmodo this: "I rarely speak in absolutes like that, right? The notion of never ever seeing somebody again. We've got Tim Blake Nelson in a movie coming up next year, right? So I never talk in absolutes like that." However, he then admitted this: "But the truth is, we're going to tell a story in these Avengers movies, and there won't be room for 100,000 characters in it. So choices will have to be made, that's for sure. But that doesn't mean you won't ever see anybody ever again." So I see where kind of Gore might be saying, like, he's saying that we tried this, we're not doing it, we're not going to double down on it, we are going to course correct. I think obviously Feige is seemingly signaling that there, noting that they are not going to be going full bore with a lot of these phase 4 characters that they introduced. Specifically, they will not be doing things with the Eternals anymore. There will not be an Eternals sequel. He told Inverse there are no immediate plans for Eternals 2. However, he did note this: there are, and I think you've seen maybe in a trailer we've released recently, an acknowledgement of some of those events. Certain giant things come out of the ocean. So he's clearly signaling against a lot of the Phase 4 stuff, recognizing that it did not go over well with a lot of their movie-going audience. However, now this is where I kind of am skeptical about the claim that a lot of these woke activists and these activists that don't know comic books or don't like comic books have been let go. Because Jackschaer is still at the company, as far as I am aware. She is showrunning the Agatha All Along series, and she's notorious for being clueless about Marvel source material, and in my opinion is one of the biggest activists there. She infamously told Inverse in 2019, "I'm not interested in adhering to comic canon that is discriminatory in any way or that violates my values system." In that same interview, she said she wanted to use the Marvel Cinematic Universe to, quote, make big positive statements. She said, "I wasn't a huge superhero movie fan before starting to work at Marvel, but now that I'm doing it, there's just so much opportunity to make big positive statements, especially something like Captain Marvel and Black Widow, to have these female-centered stories. I just can't not be involved in that." So obviously her quote-unquote big positive statements is literally pushing feminism, which has ruined the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's why it is colloquially called the MCU. She also indicated she hired the writer's room for WandaVision based on gender quotas or sex quotas, informing Inverse that the makeup of the room was, quote, incredibly intentional, and it was very much supported by Marvel, so an admission that they might have broken the law here. The writer's room featured 8 staff writers, with 4 of them being women. To this point, she said, "I choose to be a part of projects that are about positive representation. We need to see women, we need to see people of color, we need to see nuanced experiences, and we need to see different perspectives on screen. I choose to work with people who are interested in changing perspectives for the better and putting a world on screen that is something we can aspire to and have conversations about, and moving in a direction that will create a world I hope will be better for my children." So clearly indicating that she is a massive activist. She buys into this whole representation ideology. She is a DEI proponent. And again, she's still with Marvel. She has not been fired as far as I am aware. She is helming the Agatha All Along television show that's supposed to come out later this year or next year, whenever it comes out. She also noted she wanted to tone down the violence in superhero films. She said this: "I would like to see alternatives to violence in superhero movies. Maybe I would qualify that by saying alternatives to glamorizing guns and weaponry. That's one of the reasons that I love Captain Marvel. It's all about inner power, and the destruction is not at the expense of human life." No clue what she's even talking about there. She also indicated she wanted to feature more morally gray characters as well. She says, "My kids are really obsessed with good guys versus bad guys. Sometimes I explain to them every good guy can be a bad guy and vice versa. It's complicated, but that's sort of lost on them. That's one thing that I think can be explored more in the future. I would hope that there are ever increasing moves toward the gray and toward complexity." Again, that is anathema to the comic book genre. It's also anathema to the natural law, natural order of things. There are good and bad decisions that you make. This idea about being morally gray is relativism, and that theory has been repeatedly refuted over and over and over and over again. Yet somehow it still resurfaces its ugly head and ruins things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it's not just Jackschaer, though. Nate Moore is still at the company as well. Moore is the vice president of development and production at Marvel Studios. Feige credited Nate Moore for pushing Eternals to the top of the company's production list because of its focus on identity politics. This is what he told Variety. Well, the notion of switching up the gender, sexualities, and ethnicities of the characters from the comics was baked in initially. That was part of what Nate Moore was really advocating for in moving Eternals to the top of the list for us to start working on. What exactly the makeup was between what Nate put together, his internal discussion document, which is how we always start on all our projects, and what she came in and did, I don't recall exactly. Obviously, talking about Chloe Zhao's influence on changing up the gender, sexualities, and ethnicities of the original characters in the comics. And Nate Moore, Feige credits Nate Moore for pushing that, and he's still at Marvel Studios. So I don't think that they fired all these people. These two people are here. They seem to be massively influential on what Marvel Studios is doing. Obviously, someone who isn't there is Victoria Alonso. She was pushing the same agenda. She is no longer there anymore. So I'm skeptical of this rumor. I'm not sure if it is entirely accurate. But I think it's possible, just like we saw with Bungie, where they laid off a bunch of people, that a lot of woke people probably were indeed let go, have been excised. But I still think that there are probably a lot of problem people still there. And I think, in my opinion, the reputation of Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe does not change until there is concrete statements opposing woke ideology. None of these little word games that Kevin Feige is playing about, oh, we're not going to use those Phase 4 characters anymore. We're not doing Eternals 2. They need to be actively opposing woke ideology, in my opinion. This stuff is indeed evil. It must be opposed. And I think that's where that is what will convince me, not only them saying it, but actually making it clear in their films that they are opposed to it as well. So they have to say it, and then they also have to back it up with their actions. And right now, I just don't think we've seen that. We have not seen that yet. I have not seen a Marvel Studios production that has eschewed woke ideology. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, but to always speak the truth.